My daughter-in-law thought my blindness made me a fool. She started serving me a special stew, telling me it was a gourmet dish. But my other senses, the ones I rely on every day, told me a different story. Smelled wrong, it tasted wrong. She whispered to my son, "The blind woman won't know the difference." She didn't know I had a loyal niece or that a food testing lab could tell the difference between pâté and dog food. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know, I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Augusta Dubois, and at 73, my world was a tapestry woven not from light and shadow, but from sound, scent, and touch. Glaucoma, a patient thief that had crept in during my late 60s, had finally stolen the last vestiges of my sight a decade ago, leaving me in a perpetual gentle twilight. But it had given me something in return, a new heightened awareness of the world's other languages. I could tell the time of day by the changing chorus of birds outside my window, the cheerful, insistent chirping of the morning robin, the melancholic coo of the evening dove. I knew my son's mood by the heavy, weary tread of his footsteps on the hardwood floor. And I knew my daughter-in-law's heart by the cold, clipped silence she left in her wake, a silence that crackled with unspoken resentment. After my beloved husband, Charles, passed away 2 years ago, my world shrank to the confines of the home my son, Antoine, shared with his wife, Crystal. It had been a difficult decision to leave my own small, familiar house, a place where I knew the location of every light switch and floorboard by heart. But a bad fall, a reminder of my own growing fragility, had made it a practical necessity. "It's for the best, Mama," Antoine had said, his voice full of a genuine, if slightly stressed, concern that I clung to like a life raft. "We can take care of you here. You won't be alone." He was wrong. I had never been more alone in my life. It was not we who took care of me. It was Crystal. And her care was a currency she dispensed with a growing, resentful reluctance. Antoine, my son of 46, was a good man but a weak one. He worked long, grueling hours at his accounting firm, returning home each evening with a weariness that left little room for his old mother. He was a ghost in his own home, a man perpetually trying to appease his sharp, ambitious wife. His love for me, I knew, was still there, buried deep beneath his exhaustion and his fear of marital friction. But his love was a silent, passive thing, and in the face of Crystal's daily aggressions, it was utterly, completely useless. Crystal, at 44, was a woman who valued appearances above all else. Her home was a pristine, minimalist showcase, a place of sharp angles and cold surfaces, where my own presence, with my need for handrails and my collection of familiar, worn objects, was a constant, messy intrusion. She saw caring for her blind mother-in-law not as a duty of love, but as a demeaning, unpaid chore, a stain on her perfect, curated life. Her cruelty was not overt, not at first. It was a slow, insidious poisoning of my daily existence. The meals she prepared for me grew blander, simpler, while the rich, complex aromas of the gourmet dinners she and Antoine ate, garlic-infused roasts, spicy curries, buttery seafood, would drift up to my room, a nightly reminder of my exclusion. "Oh, Augusta," she'd say with a sigh if I asked for a little salt or pepper, her voice dripping with condescension. "The doctor said you need to watch your sodium. I'm just looking out for your health. You have to be more careful at your age." She controlled my world with a quiet, suffocating tyranny. She would forget to turn on the radio I so loved to listen to in the afternoons, leaving me in a disorienting silence. She would move a small end table or a decorative vase just a few inches from its usual spot, a small act of chaos that could lead to a bruised shin or a moment of terrifying disorientation for me. When I would stumble, she would rush in with a dramatic gasp. "See? This is what I mean. You're getting so unsteady. We have to be so careful." Each small accident became another piece of evidence in the case she was building against my competence, a case she would present to Antoine in hushed, worried tones later in the evening. I was a burden. She made sure I knew it in 1,000 small ways every day. My world was my bedroom, a small, quiet space where I could retreat with my audiobooks and my memories. But even there I was not safe from her. The most painful part was my grandson, Jamal, her son. He was a bright, sweet boy of 10, but Crystal used him as a pawn in her quiet war against me. My time with him was rationed, supervised. "Don't bother your grandma too much, Jamal," she'd say loudly, her voice sharp. "She needs her rest. She's very frail." She was teaching him to see me as a fragile, burdensome thing, not as his loving, vibrant grandmother, the one who had once taught him the names of all the birds by their songs. I lived in a state of quiet endurance, my dignity my only shield. My blindness had not dulled my mind. In fact, it had sharpened it. I listened. I paid attention. I understood the language of her silences, the meaning behind her overly sweet tone, the subtle shift in the air when she entered a room. My world was dark, yes, but I saw her true nature with a clarity that was almost blinding. I knew she was resentful. I knew she was cruel. I had no idea, however, of the depths of her depravity, of the monstrous act she was about to perpetrate, an act of humiliation so profound it would awaken a part of me I thought had long since died. The day of my most profound humiliation began, as so many of my days did, with a quiet, lonely breakfast in my room. Antoine had left early for a business trip, a 2-day affair that always seemed to amplify Crystal's resentment of my presence. With him gone, she no longer felt the need to maintain even the thinnest veneer of civility. The house was hers, and I was just a piece of problematic furniture she was forced to dust around. Around noon she entered my room without knocking, her footsteps a sharp, impatient click on the hardwood floor. "I made you a special lunch today, Augusta," she announced, her voice holding a strange, almost gleeful tone that immediately set my nerves on edge. "A new recipe. A high-protein gourmet stew. Very European. I thought you might like to try something different from your usual bland fare." A flicker of suspicion, a familiar, weary companion, stirred within me. Crystal never did anything for me out of pure kindness. Every thoughtful gesture had a hidden barb. But I murmured a polite, "That's very kind of you, dear." She placed the tray on my lap. The aroma that rose from the bowl was strange. It was a thick, pungent, meaty smell, but it lacked the familiar, comforting notes of herbs and spices I associated with a proper stew. It wasn't the scent of onions or garlic or thyme. It was earthy, almost gamey, with a metallic undertone that was deeply unpleasant. What kind of meat is this, Crystal?" I asked, my own heightened sense of smell trying to place the unfamiliar odor. "Oh, it's a special blend of pâté," she said quickly, a little too quickly. "Very rich. Full of nutrients. Just what you need to keep your strength up." She paused, and I could almost feel her smug smile in the air. Then, thinking I was out of earshot as she turned to leave the room, she muttered to herself, a low, vicious whisper that my sharp hearing caught with perfect, devastating clarity. "The blind woman won't know the difference anyway, right?" The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. The blind woman won't know the difference. The casual cruelty, the utter contempt in that single phrase stole my breath. What difference? The difference between what? Between fresh food and leftovers? Or something worse? My hand trembled as I lifted the spoon to my lips. My mind was screaming at me not to, but what could I do? To refuse would be to start a fight, to give her another reason to call me difficult and ungrateful. So with a sense of profound dread, I took a small, tentative taste. The texture was the first violation. It was gritty, pasty, a horrifying amalgam of unidentifiable gristle and coarse meal, all bound together in a thick gelatinous gravy. There were no chunks of meat, no soft vegetables. It was a uniform, disgusting paste. The taste was even worse. It was a flat, metallic, almost rancid flavor, devoid of any real seasoning save for an overwhelming saltiness. This was not human food. It couldn't be. I immediately recoiled, a wave of nausea washing over me, the foul taste coating my tongue. I spit the small amount into my napkin, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Crystal," I said, my voice shaky, I can't eat this. Doesn't taste right. It tastes off." She bustled back into the room, her face a mask of feigned concern. "Not right. Augusta, don't be silly. It's a delicacy. It's just a very strong, savory flavor. Your taste buds are probably just not used to something so sophisticated." "No," I insisted, my own voice gaining a new desperate strength. This is not right. Guys, spoiled. It tastes like..." My mind flashed back to a memory from my childhood, a memory so distant and so strange I couldn't believe it was surfacing now. It was the memory of my father, a kind, gentle man, opening a can of food for our old hunting dog, Old Blue. That same pungent, gamey, metallic smell. The horrifying, unthinkable realization crashed down upon me with the force of a physical blow. It was dog food. My daughter-in-law, my own son's wife, was feeding me canned dog food and calling it a gourmet stew. The humiliation was so absolute, so profound, it was almost paralyzing. I was not just a burden to her. I was less than human, an animal to be fed from a can, my blindness her perfect cover, my helplessness her cruel entertainment. The sheer, monstrous depravity of it was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. I sat there, frozen, the bowl of foul-smelling pâté on my lap, my heart shattered into a million pieces. She stood over me, her arms crossed, a small, triumphant smile on her face, waiting for me to submit, to eat the slop she had served me. I did not scream. I did not cry. A strange, glacial calm settled over me, the kind of calm that comes when you have hit rock bottom and there is nowhere left to fall. I looked up in the direction of her cold, smug face. "You are right, Crystal," I said, my voice quiet, but now devoid of any warmth, any fear. "It is a very memorable dish. Thank you for your thoughtfulness. I will enjoy it in my own time." My quiet compliance seemed to disappoint her. She had been hoping for a scene, for tears, for another display of my senility. With a final, dismissive sniff, she turned and left the room, leaving me alone with the evidence of her monstrous crime sitting on my lap. I did not eat another bite. I just sat there in the silent, gathering darkness, the foul stench of the dog food a testament to her depravity. My mind, which had been clouded by grief and a growing despair, was now terrifyingly clear. The retired music teacher was gone. The gentle, trusting grandmother was gone. In her place was a woman who had just been subjected to an act of unimaginable cruelty. A woman who now had only one purpose: to find a way to prove what had been done to her and to make her tormentor pay. My blindness was the weapon she had used against me. She had no idea I was about to turn it into a weapon of my own. The bowl of dog food sat on my bedside table all afternoon, its foul odor a constant, nauseating reminder of Crystal's depravity. It was more than just an insult. It was a declaration. It was her telling me, in the most dehumanizing way imaginable, what she truly thought of me. I was not family. I was not even a person. I was an animal, a burden to be fed the cheapest, most disgusting slop she could find, my blindness a convenient cloak for her cruelty. My initial shock and horror, the profound sense of violation, began to cool, to crystallize into a cold, hard, analytical fury. Crying was a luxury I could not afford. A direct confrontation would be futile. I could already hear her defense, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Oh, you poor, confused thing. You're imagining things again. It was a French pâté, a delicacy. Your old taste buds just aren't what they used to be." She would twist my accusation into another symptom of my failing mind, and my son, my weak, cowardly Antoine, would stand by and let her. He would choose the path of least resistance, the path that didn't involve confronting his monstrous wife. No, I could not fight her with words. She was a master of that game, a weaver of lies and manipulations. I, who had spent my life teaching music, the most truthful and emotional of languages, was no match for her brand of poisonous fiction. I needed proof. Undeniable, irrefutable scientific proof. But how? How could I, a blind woman confined to my room, prove what was in that bowl? I couldn't just walk to a laboratory. I couldn't mail a sample without arousing suspicion. I was trapped, a prisoner in her house, my every move monitored, my every need a transaction she controlled. My mind, denied the distraction of sight, began to work with a desperate, focused intensity. I thought like a composer, arranging the disparate elements of my situation into a coherent plan. My assets were my sharp hearing, my even sharper mind, my encyclopedic knowledge of my own home, and one other crucial element: my niece Brenda. Brenda was my sister's girl, a bright, fiery young woman in her late 20s who worked as a paralegal downtown. She was the only member of the family who still made an effort to see me, who would call just to chat, her visits a small, precious beacon of genuine affection in my increasingly dark world. Crystal despised her, of course. She saw Brenda's intelligence and her loyalty to me as a threat, and she made Brenda's visits as uncomfortable as possible, often hovering in the doorway, her presence a chilling damper on our conversation. Brenda had told me months ago, "Aunt Augusta, if you ever need anything at all, you call me." I don't trust that woman an inch. Brenda was my only ally. and she was my only hope. The first part of my plan was to preserve the evidence. I couldn't leave the dog food sitting out. Crystal would see it and dispose of it. Using my sense of touch, I navigated to the small dresser where I kept my things. In the back of a drawer, behind my neatly folded handkerchiefs, was a small empty jam jar I had saved for holding stray buttons, its glass cool and solid in my hand. With a grim determination, I scraped the contents of the bowl into the jar, the pasty, gritty texture making my stomach turn. I screwed the lid on tight, then cleaned the bowl and spoon with a wet cloth until they were spotless. I then wrapped the jar in one of my old thick wool socks and hid it at the very bottom of my knitting basket, beneath layers of yarn and half-finished projects. It was a small, pathetic hiding place, but it was the best I could do. The next step was to arrange the pickup. I had to get the sample to Brenda without Crystal or Antoine knowing. This would require a performance. The next morning I feigned a small coughing fit. When Crystal came into my room, her face a mask of annoyed concern, I told her I was feeling a little weak, that perhaps I had caught a small chill. I was thinking, I said, my voice deliberately frail, perhaps my niece Brenda could come by for a short visit this afternoon? Her cheerful voice always seems to do me a world of good. Crystal's eyes narrowed with suspicion. She did not like Brenda visiting. But to refuse a sick old woman a visit from her beloved niece might seem overly cruel even for her. I suppose, she said reluctantly. But only for an hour. You need your rest. Perfect. The meeting was set. When Brenda arrived that afternoon, I could hear Crystal hovering in the hallway, her ears no doubt straining to catch our conversation. I greeted Brenda with a hug, my arms clinging to her for a moment longer than usual. "Oh, Aunt Augusta," she whispered, "you feel so thin. Are you all right?" "I will be, my dear," I whispered back. We made small talk, speaking of trivial things, the weather, the church bake sale, a new book Brenda was reading. All the while my heart was pounding. Finally, as the hour drew to a close, I knew it was time. "Brenda, darling," I said, my voice full of a practiced grandmotherly warmth, "before you go, could you do your old aunt a favor? I finished knitting a little scarf for your mother for her birthday next month. It's here in my knitting basket. Could you take it with you so you don't have to make another trip?" I gestured towards the basket by my chair. As she leaned over, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "At the very bottom. Wrapped in a wool sock. Take it. Do not look at it. Do not ask questions. Just take it. I will call you tonight and explain." I felt her hand brush against the hard glass of the jar. She stiffened for a fraction of a second, but she was a smart girl, my Brenda. Her composure didn't break. She rummaged for a moment, then pulled out a half-finished blue scarf I had deliberately placed on top. "Oh, it's beautiful, Auntie," she said, her voice bright, cheerful, for the benefit of the eavesdropper in the hallway. "Mom will love it." She tucked the scarf into her large handbag and with it the hidden jar of evidence. She gave me another hug, this one tight with a new, unspoken understanding. "I'll call you tonight," she whispered into my hair. And then she was gone. I sat back in my chair, my body trembling with the adrenaline of my small, desperate victory. The first part of my plan was complete. The evidence was out of the house. It was now in the hands of my loyal, intelligent niece. That night, after Crystal and Antoine were asleep, I made the call. I told Brenda everything. The dog food. The gourmet stew. Crystal's cruel, whispered words. Brenda was silent at first, a silence so profound I thought she might be ill. Then I heard her let out a sound, a single choked sob of pure rage. "That monster," she hissed, her voice shaking. "That absolute monster. And Augusta, I am so sorry. I knew she was awful, but I never imagined." "There is no time for sorry, my dear," I said, my own voice calm now, focused. "There is only time for action. I need you to do something for me. I need you to take that sample to a laboratory. A food analysis lab. I need an official report. I need proof." "Consider it done," Brenda said, her voice now as cold and as hard as my own. "She thought she could get away with it because you can't see. She's about to find out just how clearly you do." The week that followed my desperate plea to Brenda was an agony of waiting. Each day felt like a year, a slow, torturous crawl through a landscape of anxiety and a new, unfamiliar hope. My life inside Antoine and Crystal's home continued its grim, humiliating routine. Crystal still served me my special stew, her face a mask of condescending sweetness, her every action a fresh twist of the knife. I would pretend to eat a few spoonfuls, then discreetly dispose of the rest, my stomach churning with a mixture of disgust and a cold, simmering rage. She thought she was still in control. She had no idea that her secret, her monstrous, dehumanizing secret, was at that very moment being analyzed under a microscope in a laboratory downtown. Brenda called me every evening with quiet, coded updates, our conversations a masterpiece of familial subterfuge, conducted in whispers while I knew Crystal was likely listening from the hallway. "Aunt Augusta," she'd say, her voice bright and cheerful, "I just wanted to tell you that the new yarn you recommended for Mom's scarf is just beautiful. The analysis came back and it's a very unique blend. Very high in protein. Or, the knitting pattern is a little more complex than I thought. I've had to consult with a few experts. They're preparing a full report on the E-stitch composition." I understood. The yarn was the dog food. The experts were the lab technicians. The report was the proof I so desperately needed. The waiting was a trial of faith. I would sit in my dark, quiet room, my hands clasped in prayer, my mind a battlefield. Had I done the right thing? Was I destroying my own family? But then I would remember the gritty, foul texture of that stew in my mouth, the sound of Crystal's cruel, dismissive whisper, "The blind woman won't know the difference." And my resolve would harden like a stone. This was not about destroying my family. It was about reclaiming my own humanity, my own dignity from a woman who had tried so brutally to strip it from me. Brenda, true to her word, was a formidable ally. As a paralegal, she understood the importance of a clear, undeniable chain of evidence. She didn't just drop the sample off at any lab. She found a reputable, accredited food analysis laboratory, the kind used by the health department and in legal disputes. She paid for the analysis with her own money, telling the lab technician it was a competitor's product for a catering business dispute she was working on, ensuring the test would be official and the report legally admissible if needed. While we waited, I began my own quiet investigation, using the only tools I had, my sharp ears and my even sharper mind. I started leaving the voice recorder on my smartphone running silently in my room during the day. Most of what I captured was just the mundane sounds of the house, the television, the distant hum of the refrigerator. But occasionally I would capture gold. I recorded Crystal on the phone with one of her friends, her voice full of a familiar, martyred sigh. "Oh, you have no idea," she'd said. "It's a full-time job. I have to cook all her meals separately. She's on a very specific high-protein diet. So bland. But you do what you have to do. A high-protein diet." The lie was so effortless for her. I saved the recording. It was another piece of the puzzle, another nail for her coffin. The week of waiting felt like a lifetime. My anxiety grew with each passing day. What if the lab couldn't identify the contents? What if the report was inconclusive? What if my entire plan, my one hope for justice, rested on a sample that was too small, too degraded? Finally the call came. It was Brenda, her voice tight, controlled. "Auntie," she said, "I have the report. It's exactly what you thought. It's worse." She told me she was coming over immediately, that she would tell Antoine and Crystal she was bringing me a new audiobook to listen to. I waited, my heart a frantic, fluttering bird in my chest. When Brenda arrived, I heard Crystal greet her at the door with a voice full of a false, sugary sweetness. "Brenda. So lovely to see you. How kind of you to visit poor Augusta." Brenda's voice when she replied was like chipping ice. "It's no trouble at all, Crystal. I always make time for family." She came into my room and quietly closed the door. She didn't have to say a word. I could feel the righteous fury radiating from her. She took my hand and squeezed it tight. "Auntie," she said, her voice shaking with rage, "I am so sorry. You were right. You were right about everything." She had the official sealed envelope from the laboratory. My quiet, desperate investigation had reached its conclusion. The truth was here in this room, printed in cold, hard scientific language on a piece of paper. The time for suspicion, for fear, for quiet endurance was over. The time for justice, for a full, righteous and public reckoning, was about to begin. Crystal thought she was untouchable. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Brenda knelt before me, taking my trembling hands in hers. Her own hands were cold, but her grip was firm, a silent transfer of her own youthful strength and righteous anger to me. She had the official sealed envelope from the laboratory in her lap. My quiet, desperate investigation had reached its conclusion. The truth was here in this room waiting to be read aloud. "Are you ready, Aunt Augusta?" she asked softly, her voice still shaking with a barely contained fury. I took a deep, steadying breath and nodded. "Read it to me, my dear. Read me the truth." Brenda broke the seal and unfolded the document. The rustle of the heavy paper was the only sound in the room. Then she began to read, her voice a monotone of barely controlled rage. The lab report was a cold, clinical, and utterly devastating document. It was not filled with emotional language, but with the stark, irrefutable language of science, which somehow made it even more horrifying. Subject: Food Sample A, submitted for comprehensive compositional and nutritional analysis, Brenda began. She read through the technical details, the testing methodologies, the chemical breakdowns. Then she got to the conclusion. "Summary of findings," she read, her voice cracking slightly. "The sample provided is a homogeneous, paste-like substance consisting primarily of processed animal byproducts, including mechanically separated poultry, meat and bone meal and animal digest." She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "Auntie, animal digest it's the chemically treated remains of unspecified animal tissue." I felt a wave of nausea so profound I had to grip the arms of my chair to steady myself. Brenda continued, her voice now a low, venomous hiss. "Nutritional analysis reveals high concentrations of protein and ash content, fortified with a standard vitamin and mineral pack consistent with commercial animal feed. The primary grain filler identified is cornmeal with trace amounts of soy." She looked up at me, her eyes blazing. "It's a list of ingredients, Auntie. Like from the back of a can." And then came the final soul-destroying summary, the sentence that would become the cornerstone of my justice. Conclusion: the submitted sample is materially consistent in composition, texture, and nutritional value with a low-grade, commercially available canned dog food, specifically formulated for the dietary needs of a domestic canine. Dog food. The words, so clinical, so scientific, confirmed the horrifying truth my own senses had already told me. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was a fact, documented, proven, undeniable. A fact that I now held in my hands, a weapon of immense power. For a long moment I could not speak. The full weight of Crystal's depravity, her monstrous, dehumanizing cruelty washed over me. She had not just neglected me. She had systematically, deliberately fed me food intended for an animal. She had looked at me, her husband's blind, grieving mother, and had seen not a person, but a dog to be fed from a can. The tears I had refused to shed for weeks finally came, not tears of sadness, but tears of pure, unadulterated rage. "That monster," Brenda hissed, her own tears of fury now falling freely. "That absolute monster. And Augusta, I am so sorry. I knew she was awful, but I never imagined." "There is no time for sorry, my dear," I said, my voice quiet now, but imbued with a new, terrifying strength. "There is only time for action." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. The time for weeping was over. The time for retribution had begun. "What do we do, Auntie?" Brenda asked, her gaze fixed on mine, ready for a command. "We have the proof. Do we confront her? Do we tell Antoine?" "No," I said, my mind the mind of a woman who understood systems working with a cold, clear precision. "A confrontation would give her a chance to lie, to manipulate, to destroy the evidence. Antoine has proven himself to be a coward. He would choose the path of least resistance. He would choose his wife's lies over his mother's truth." I paused, then looked in the direction of Brenda's voice. "No, my dear. We are not going to handle this as a family matter. Crystal has elevated this beyond a family dispute. This is now a criminal matter. We are going to the authorities." Brenda's eyes widened. "The police?" "Yes," I said. "And adult protective services. We are not going to them with a story, with a suspicion. We are going to them with a case. A complete case. We have the lab report, a piece of irrefutable scientific evidence. We have my testimony. And," I added, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face, "we have my little audio recordings of Crystal herself, talking about my special high-protein diet. We have a documented pattern of abuse, of neglect, and now of assault." I felt a surge of power, of agency I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer the helpless, blind woman in the back room. I was the architect of a legal strategy, the chief investigator in the case of my own abuse. She thought my blindness was her shield, Brenda, I said, my voice as hard as stone. She used it to hide her monstrous cruelty. She is about to learn that my other senses, my mind, my spirit, they see everything. And they see her for the monster she truly is. Brenda nodded, her face set with a grim determination that mirrored my own. When, Auntie? She asked. Tomorrow morning, I replied. First thing. She has served me her special stew for the last time. Tomorrow we will serve her with a side of cold, hard legal justice. The next morning Brenda arrived not with a book but with a purpose. She helped me dress in my finest Sunday suit, the one I hadn't worn since before Charles passed. We were not going to the police station as victims, but as plaintiffs, as women armed with an unshakable truth. Brenda had the lab report in a crisp legal envelope. I had my small smartphone with its damning audio recordings, tucked safely in my handbag. We bypassed the local precinct. On the advice of Brenda's boss, a savvy lawyer who had been appalled by my story, we went directly to the county's elder abuse unit, a specialized division of detectives trained to handle cases just like mine. We were met not with the weary skepticism of a front desk officer, but with the serious, focused attention of a detective named Maria Flores, a woman whose sharp, intelligent eyes seemed to understand everything before I even spoke a word. I told my story, my voice clear and steady, my account bolstered by Brenda's presence. I did not cry. I did not rage. I simply, methodically presented the facts. The dependence. The neglect. The special stew. The overheard whisper. The secret sample. And finally the lab report. Detective Flores read the report, her expression growing more grim with every scientific, damning detail. Then I played her the audio recordings from my phone. Crystal's condescending voice, speaking of my special high-protein diet, filled the small, quiet interview room. When it was all over, Detective Flores looked at me, her eyes full of a profound, professional respect. Mrs. Du Bois, she said, thank you for your courage. What you have endured is horrific. And the evidence you have gathered is overwhelming. We will be proceeding with this immediately. The arrest happened that afternoon. I was not there to see it, but Brenda, who had friends in all the right places, gave me a full report later. Detective Flores and 2 uniformed officers arrived at my son's house. Crystal answered the door, her face a mask of annoyed surprise. When she saw the police, her expression shifted to one of cautious, defensive charm. Officers, she'd said with a bright, false smile. Can I help you? Are you Crystal Du Bois? Detective Flores asked, her voice flat, professional. Yes, I am, she'd replied. Is there a problem? Yes, ma'am, the detective had said. There is. You are under arrest for the willful abuse and neglect of a vulnerable adult and for assault. Crystal's smile vanished, replaced by a look of sputtering, incredulous disbelief. Assault? This is ridiculous. Who is accusing me of this? It's my mother-in-law, isn't it? That senile old woman is making up stories again. I am her caregiver. I have done nothing but sacrifice for her. Detective Flores just looked at her, her expression one of utter disdain. She then held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was the official lab analysis of the gourmet stew. Ma'am, the detective said, her voice like ice, we have the laboratory report on the food you have been feeding your blind 73-year-old mother-in-law for the past several weeks. It has been positively identified as canine food. Do you have anything to say to that? The color drained from her face. Her lies, her manipulations, her entire world of deceit had crumbled in the face of a single, undeniable piece of scientific truth. She stared at the report, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, her carefully constructed narrative destroyed beyond repair. They handcuffed her right there on her own doorstep in front of her gossiping neighbors. Her polished, sophisticated facade finally shattered, revealing the ugly, pathetic creature beneath. She wept, she pleaded, she screamed, a grotesque performance of a victimhood she had not earned. My son Antoine, who had arrived home just in time to witness the scene, just stood there, his face ashen, his own world imploding from his cowardly complicity. The aftermath was swift and just. The case against Crystal was overwhelming. Faced with the lab report, the audio recordings, and the prospect of a very public, very humiliating trial, She took a plea deal. She was convicted of a felony, sentenced to a year of community service, ironically at an animal shelter, and 5 years of probation. The court also issued a permanent restraining order, barring her from ever coming near me again. Antoine, my son, was shattered. Shamed, disgraced, and finally forced to confront the true nature of the woman he had so weakly enabled, he left her. Their marriage, built on a foundation of her cruelty and his cowardice, could not survive the harsh light of the truth. He came to me, his apologies choked with a shame so deep it was almost pitiable. I listened, but I offered no easy absolution. The wounds were too deep, the betrayal too profound. But I was free. I was safe. My niece, Brenda, helped me find a wonderful new in-home carer, a kind, respectful woman who treated me not as a burden but as a person. My home was once again my sanctuary, filled not with the stench of deceit, but with the scent of my favorite flowers and the beautiful, complex harmonies of the music I loved. My revenge was not loud or violent. It was quiet, intelligent, and absolute. I had used my wits, my resilience, and the power of a simple, undeniable truth to bring a monster to justice. She had thought my blindness was my greatest weakness. She had no idea that it had given me a clarity of vision, a sharpness of my other senses, that had allowed me to see her for exactly what she was. And that was a truth that had, in the end, set me free.